да, Леонид, примите мои слова. Вам ленточку дали, да? Ну, это логично, да. Я честно говоря, с вами согласился. Ну, конечно, когда ветрено, тогда и в такую погоду. Ну, если вам теплее, садитесь чуть-чуть.
There are a few extra chairs. Please take advantage. The cemetery provided a few chairs for people to sit. My name is Susan Winkelstein, and I'm a funeral director with Chicago Jewish Funerals. Just a gentle reminder before we start the service, if anyone has a cell phone here that's present, please make sure that's in the silent mode or turned off completely. That would be appreciated. We're about to begin the service. Mrs. Revekka Moiseenko, officiating this afternoon, will be Rabbi Michael Tillman.
Thank you, Susan. Before we begin this service, my friends, we shall perform a very ancient ritual, which is called Kriya in the Hebrew language. Since the biblical times, whenever our ancestors would receive sad news of a passing of a loved one, they would tear their clothes and put a dust upon the head as a sign of mourning. And a part of that custom, and that is rent in our garment on a mournful occasion, we have retained in our community to this day. Therefore, at this time, I would like to ask the children of the deceased, Lonia and Lucy, please make a vertical tear on the ribbons that were given to you. Lonia, вам дали ленточку, надорвите ее, пожалуйста, вертикально. Да, или пусть вам кто-то поможет. Yeah, this is good. Yes. Oh, beautiful. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan emet. Blessed be Lord our God, ruler of the universe, judge of truth. Amen. Even if you never read the Bible, the Torah, you still would be familiar with a story that opens the narrative of the sacred scripture, and that is the story of creation of the world. Everybody knows that story. God created the world in 6 days. On the 6th day, according to the text, God created the first human being, Adam. And our rabbis, our ancient teachers, offered a brilliant insight on that particular episode in the Bible. They said that it was Adam, the first human being, that brought light into the world. Now that is an interesting idea. It seems to be simple, but actually it's quite interesting. The text itself says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So it was God who created the light. But it was Adam who brought that light into the world. All of us are descendants of Adam and Eve, at least figuratively speaking. It means that it is a spiritual duty of every human being to be like Adam, to bring forth the light. And when we gather together to honor those whom we love, but whom unfortunately lost, it is not only about the pain, the bitterness, the tears of sorrow, and mutual support, of course. But then even more so, it is about the light that this person brought into this world. Today, my friends, we are here to contemplate the light that Margarita, or Rita, as she was known, that she brought into this world. And that light is not the reason to be sad. That light is the reason to be joyous and proud. And here I'm not referring necessarily to the length of her days, even though that is also something to be proud of, because she literally lived the entire century of our history, and even a bit longer than that. She fell 2 weeks, I think a couple of weeks short of her 101st birthday of hers. But I'm referring to the way she lived. And it is not by chance I chose to share with you this story about the light, because you all know that Margarita was a teacher. She taught the Russian language and literature. And think about a synonym in the English language for the word education: enlightenment. The root of that word is light. In her case, she literally brought light into this world in many senses of this word. Being a dedicated family woman, being a wonderful teacher. And I'm sure to these days there are many, many people in Vsevolozhsk and beyond who are grateful to their beloved teacher. How beloved a teacher she was, I will mention that a little bit later. But for now, I suggest we reflect together with King Solomon on the meaning of life. Because, see, life is never a smooth sail. In the course of our lives, we encounter everything. We encounter good things, we encounter bad things. We encounter pleasure, we encounter pain. But it is our duty to make sure that each experience is meaningful. And that is how we construct, if you will, create that light that we emanate and bring into the world. The words of King Solomon, the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. לכל זמן ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת לרדת ועת למות, עת לדעת ועת לקור נטוע, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנון, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת רקוד, עת להשליך אבנים ועת כנוס אבנים, עת לחבוק ועת לרחוק מהבק, עת לבקש ועת לאבד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוא ועת לקרוא, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. It is a time to speak. It is a time to contemplate Margarita's light. The light will continue to shine even beyond today. Because in the most important sense of that word, the spiritual sense of that word, the angel of death cannot take away from us. Because of that light, it will continue to affect us, to inspire us, to move us to be better human beings. Margarita, or as she is known by her Hebrew name Revekka, that was her given name, was born in Ukraine. And again, I want to mention, she lived more than a century of our history. Just imagine this, she was born in the middle of the civil war in Russia that was raging at the time. In fact, where she was born in Ukraine, supposedly in Melitopol, which is in the Zaporozhye Oblast, that was the epicenter of destruction, of murders, of desolation, of pogroms. Both the White Army, Belly, and the Red Army, Krasny, both of them engaged in the Jewish pogroms. That was the year she was born, 1919. And she lived through the 1920s and 1930s when the New World, a concerted effort to build the New World, the new society was made, and she grew up in that environment, the environment of enthusiasts. And she went to college, And again, only the Soviet authorities, the Soviet regime allowed the Jews to obtain higher education in large numbers. That was a very important initiative of the government. She was one of those who were fortunate enough. She went into the teachers' college, but then, of course, we know what happened next. A terrible tragedy has fallen upon our people, our country. The Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, and things became very difficult. They had to leave, they had to evacuate, as they call it, and the stories that family members tell each other from generation to generation, these stories I heard many times from many, many families. They board the train is going east, and the German bombers go ahead and bomb that train, knowing that this is a civilian train carrying people who are trying to move away from the combat. And young Rita, she went through those experiences herself. But with God's help, they survived, made it into the heart of Russia, the city called Magnitogorsk. And it is there, in Magnitogorsk, that the pivotal event of Rita's life occurred. That's where she met her beloved Abram. May his memory be a blessing. Abram was a war hero, literally, without any exaggerations. And I will not repeat that story that I told you 12 years ago, but he was severely wounded defending our country, fighting the Nazis. But because of his wound, because of his injuries, the man decided to send him to be an instructor in the tank academy, in the tank school. And it is in that same institution that Rita also was teaching. And that's how they met. And the reason I'm stressing this aspect of her life, in this particular moment of her life, and the reason I call it the pivotal moment, as we discussed yesterday with Lucy, it is very difficult to talk about Abram without talking about Rita, and talk about Rita without talking about Abram. Because their lives were so intertwined throughout those decades that they lived together, that they were building the family. When they got married, the war was still raging, but all the same, they wanted to start a family. They wanted to rebuild their lives destroyed by the terrible war. And rebuild they had. Eventually, in the meantime, they moved to Chelyabinsk, which is also in the Ural Mountains, or Urals as the English speakers call them, but then eventually they moved to the Leningrad, or Leningradskaya Oblast, which is now called St. Petersburg, a place called Vsevolozhskaya. Well, it's in Russia there were no suburbs proper. I would say like satellite town. It's more like a satellite town. But yeah, now it's probably a suburb. Now it's probably, in fact, yes, it is. I was talking to somebody today in St. Petersburg. They told me it's basically, it's a suburb. Yeah. So yes, now it's right. Back then it was just a satellite town. So it was a small place, small town, and it is there that they made their home. It's there that when they raised their family. It is there where Rita, Margarita, became a teacher, and a beloved teacher. She taught, as I said, Russian language and literature up to the 8th grade. That was her kind of a sort of middle school, basically, what we would call it here in America. Now, let me just mention how revered she was. There are many stories that could be told about that part of her, that aspect of her life, but just one of them, one of those stories. At some point, she was very sick. She had a pneumonia, something along those lines, and which had some complications. So she was temporarily disabled, had a vertigo, and became dizzy. So it was difficult for her to walk. All the same, she did not retire or did not even suspend her teaching activity. She kept on teaching. But her students loved her so much that they would come to her home and they would walk her. These kids would walk her to school, to the school. She would teach the class and then they would walk her back home. Eventually she recovered, thank God. But this is how respected and revered she was. In 1993, was another important year, a pivotal year for that matter. I'll use that word again, in Margarita's and Abram's life and Nona's life. Because as well know, Lucy and Sasha, or Alex, as he was on here, Alexander. Yeah, so they decided to leave for the United States, and they left in 1980, seeking better life for themselves and the future generations of the family. Rita and the rest of the family left behind, and they made a decision to come to the United States in 1993. Now, Abram was already 80. Rita was, 74? 4. So, at that age, moving to a different country, to say that it is stressful is to say nothing. To add to that, Abram was not to begin with, because again, the wartime and the wounds and injuries associated with it made him a person with really limited abilities, and of course all that, and as your body ages, all that came to light. It was a brave, courageous decision, but all the same, they made that decision. They came here, they joined their family. The family was reunited, and Rita was immensely proud of that. Veronica told me a wonderful, I'm sure she'll probably mention that today, because she had this unique experience. Unlike most kids, you were born from the very, very years you have your grandparents. Well, then eventually, like everybody else, they pass away. She didn't know how to have grandparents until she was 7, right? And then all of a sudden, she got a grandma. She had a grandpa. And that was truly a wonderful experience, but I will not talk about that. Veronica will. Now, Margarita was советская женщина. And I mean that in the most sublime sense of that word. Советская женщина means Soviet woman. There is a difference, a big difference between the Soviet women and other women. The difference is that if you take Rita's peers here in the United States, these ladies usually have more or less similar trajectory of their life, and nothing's wrong with it. It's a good life. Yeah? They're born, they grow up, they finish school, they work for a couple of years until they're fortunate enough to meet their husband, they get married, and then they dedicate themselves to the family, become homemakers. I'm not criticizing this as a lifestyle that America used to have for decades and decades, for generations and generations. The Soviet Union was a different country with a different lifestyle. Soviet women always worked 2 jobs. So, the first job was the one they left for in the morning. Second job, the one they arrived in the evening. That's to make sure that the home is a comfortable and welcoming place. To take care of the husband, take care of the kids, that everything is good with the kids. That's hard work too. And she valiantly, like all the Soviet Union, the Soviet women, she valiantly did that work, those 2 works, 2 jobs. Now, truly it's a heroic deed. Not only Abram was a hero, she was a hero too. A hero of everyday life, if you will. She loved her work because, again, a teacher is not just somebody who transmits information. A teacher, first and foremost, is a person who helps young people shape their value system. That's what teacher does. And that is why, to be a good teacher, it has to be in your heart. It's not only about what you know, not about methods of methodology and skills that you acquire. It is about your heart. And Margarita was a person who truly was, she was born to be a teacher. But besides all those things, she was also a person who loved to enjoy life. How did she find time to do that? She worked, but somehow she did. They had, since they lived in a small town, they were able to have a little place there where they had a greenhouse. Abraham had a greenhouse when he would raise, he would grow cucumbers, tomatoes in the winter. And winters in Leningrad, I'm telling you, they're worse than in Chicago, in my opinion, to be truthful, or at least the same. They also had apples, strawberries, so they had their own little agriculture going there, and they took care of all that. And then she found time to crochet, to knit, to cross stitch. Yesterday they showed me one of these things that was beautiful, beautiful stuff. She found time to read, and in fact she was brilliant at solving crossword puzzles too. Sharp mind, brilliant mind. She knew poetry, she loved poetry, and she could recite Russian classical poets by heart. Almost until the last week of her life. Yeah, Sasha told me that, they read this, he would recite one line and she would recite from the memory the next line from the same poem. Remarkable. And last but not least, as Mama, that lady, as a grandmother, she knew how to cook and she knew how to bake. And one of her most famous creations was the Napoleon. The Napoleon that Veronica attempted to replicate, with a limited success, shall I say, right? Again, she can if she wants to tell you about that, she will. but Napoleon that Margarita made, the Ritmit, was incomparable. It was just really a wonderful creation. And another aspect of her personality I would like to highlight was her perseverance and her thirst for knowledge. Yes, she read a lot, but she didn't just read to spend time, she learned. How do I know that? Well, I'll tell you one thing. She came here, I've already said, she was far from being a teenager, very far. She learned English. By the way, in the Soviet Union, she learned German, that was her primary language, but she learned English. She was 78. She passed the citizenship exam in the English language at the age of 78. I mean, that's just crazy. But she did it. Amazing. So this was truly a woman who lived a beautiful life. Not because it was a long one, because it was a meaningful one. Because for a century, she emanated light and brought it into this world. But now I would like to talk about the most important part of Rita's life, her family. Abram, Allah Shalom, may his memory be a blessing. They were together, they were married for 68 years. And I cannot stress enough how important that connection was to her and to him, how intertwined their lives were. And her mission, as I said, Abram was not a very healthy person due to wartime injuries and wounds. She took care of him all that time, especially when his health began to decline. It was the meaning of Margarita's life to take care of him. And even when he became very weak, could not walk anymore, became bedridden, she was still there every step, all the time, every minute. Of course, Abram's passing also lived a long life, 98, thank God. But it was a very difficult moment in Rita's life. A turning moment, must I say. I don't think she fully recovered from that loss. God blessed her with wonderful children. She has a daughter, Lucy, or Ludmila, right, and the son, Lonya. As a mother, she has fulfilled her mission completely. Because the mission of every parent is to raise a good kid. Successful kid, yes, it's a good bonus. When they find success in life, make money, become famous, whatever. But our mission is complete when I say to myself, my son, my daughter grew up to be a good human being. Mission accomplished. She was rightfully proud of her children. Lucy is married to Sasha, or Alexander. Was also very dear to her heart, and always had a respectful relationship with mother of Lonya's children, Marta. She was blessed with wonderful grandchildren. Her grandson Oleg, or known as Alex in English, right? Veronica, who also followed the footsteps of her grandma, became a teacher, which is wonderful. Oleg is married to Marina, Veronica is married to Sean, and Lonya's children are Igor, who's married to Ola, and he has a daughter, Ola. And God blessed her long life. She was blessed with great grandchildren, Bella and Amelia, and Maggie and Ellie. At this time, my friends, we shall continue to reflect on the light that Rita brought into this world through the thoughts and reminiscences of her loved ones. So at this time, I would like to invite, let's see who's first on the list here. Oh, Veronica, you are the first one. Yes? Please come forward and share your thoughts with us.
One of our grandma's greatest loves in life was reading and literature. She was always reciting poetry or stihi. She was even reciting poems until the very end with my father. Sometimes she and my dad would recite poems when my grandma had glimmers of moments of clarity, and sometimes my dad's recitings of the poems would induce those moments of clarity, where even for just a moment, she could be herself. One of Grandma's favorite poets was Alexander Pushkin, and he writes, "Ecstasy is a glass full of tea and a piece of sugar in the mouth." This perfectly describes our most cherished memories of her: drinking tea, eating something sweet, likely something she had baked up, and chatting while looking at old photos. Maybe they were photos of Olga with huge bows in her hair being paraded around, or memories of foraging for berries. I remember when she first came to live with us, I was so excited to have a baker in the house because my mother was not one. She would bake cookies or fruit crumb cake, but what she was really known for was her Napoleon. One time, I decided to make Napoleon and bring it to my grandma's house for a visit, and I believe my cousins were there as well. It turned out terribly, inedible. Luckily, my grandma always had an array of treats on hand, so our sweet tooths were satisfied. Other times over tea, she would often recount how she met my grandpa, who she loved and cared for so dearly. She was incredibly compassionate and cared for Grandpa until the very end, much like both my parents did for her. That care extended to the whole family. She would call Lyonya every single day to check in and chat on the phone. I also loved talking to her on the phone, and one of the best things about talking to her, because this was before caller ID, was her genuine surprise and glee when she found out it was one of her grandchildren on the other end. Grandma has been incredibly impactful on our family in more ways than I can list right now. Like her, I am a teacher, and I hope to be as beloved to my students as my grandma was to hers. I'm sure everyone else right now can also think of a trait that they have taken from Grandma. For example, I'm sure we'll end our celebration of her life today with tea and sweets, just as she would have liked.
And at this time, Oleg or Alex, whatever he prefers, will share his thoughts about it.
So, my relationship with Grandma was very different from Veronica's. Veronica first met her when she was 7. Now, most of my memories with her are from my early childhood. So, when I was 9 years old, we left, and I didn't see her until I was already an adult. So there was a big gap there. Now, I don't have many vivid memories from my early childhood, but I do have one that it's kept popping into my head over the years. It's just a silly little thing. I don't know how old I was, maybe 5, 6, 7. I remember I was in the kitchen at her house, and she was making strawberry preserves. There was a big pot on the stove where it seemed huge to me. And I was hanging around her, literally tugging at her apron, give me a taste, give me a taste, give me a taste. Finally, when it was all ready, she said, "Okay, I'll give you a taste." I stood up on my tiptoes, I looked in the pot, red liquid, red soup, and it had this white foam on it, and she gave me a spoonful of that. And it was the best thing I'd ever tasted before, and possibly since. So, as mentioned before, she loved to cook, and I think that was representative of her as a person. She was a caretaker, and that was the main way that she took care of her family. I spent every summer over there from the time my parents decided they couldn't deal with me 12 months out of the year until we left the country at 9. So she took care of me all those summers. She took care of her own family before, and then when she came here in '93, she took care of my grandfather until the day he died. So that's how I remember her. She didn't live for herself. She lived for her family.
Thank you. And finally, Lucy will share with us her thoughts about her beloved mom.
I wasn't going to speak today at all, but this morning something just came to my head, and fortunately or unfortunately, Rebbe, say everything that I am going to. I was going to say. But anyway, I repeat some of them. First of all, what I would like to say. Usually, when people say eulogy about people who passed away, they say, about their achievement. Okay, he was great scientist, or good engineer, or doctor, or he achieved in their life that, and that. Okay, and I cannot say this about my mother. She was just average woman who took care of her family, and by the way, she all her life she lived together with her parents. So they evacuated from Ukraine to Ural, and then they came back to Leningrad, St. Petersburg. They always, all her life, they lived together. And my father did not mind it. It's not easy to live with in-laws, probably in one house, but it's what it was. And she took care about her parents at the day, up to the day they died. And again, how she cared about my father, who was bedridden. Not every woman in '93 could do it. Actually, almost nobody. It was very difficult for her. But in difficulty, two aspects of difficulty. One is physical, which is very difficult for 93 years old. Another aspect is emotional and psychological. Okay? And I think somebody, people with a strong willpower could push themselves physically to do things. Okay? But emotional aspect, psychological, it's absolutely different. So she never put her in a nursing home because she wouldn't be able to handle it without knowing what's going on, and so she cared for him until his last day. And since then, things went down to her. She broke her hip, that, and she went down. But I want to say something maybe more optimistic from my memories. My mother looked, you see how beautiful she is, right? Yeah, you see it. And she was really looked young. But from another hand, when I was little, I was big girl, which looked older than her age. Like at about 12, I was the same size almost as now, and it's considered that I am early boomer. I was really big. Not for children, now that's maybe nothing, but that's I consider big. So when was I and Mama, we went for a walk, and always somebody come to her, young man, start, like, talk with her. Once I remember we were taking train from Leningrad, St. Petersburg to Sevastopol. Half an hour ride. So we sit in the train, and all of a sudden three soldiers come to us and sit on an opposite bench и start, как сказать, заигрывать, заигрывать. Flirt with my mother, flirt with me, my mother flirt with them too, smiling, so on. And then all of a sudden it's almost stop. Okay, Mama, let's go. And then when they look on faces of the soldiers, their jaw fall down. No, it was just little story. It was a lot of stories like this. And last few years was very, very hard for her. And now, when she died, and I saw her face is so peaceful and so smooth, no wrinkles on her head. Today when we went to see her, she was in a dress which she attempted, my son wearing the same scarf, and everything looks very, very peaceful. And I hope she's in peace now and happy, and everything what was so difficult for her last few years just is gone. So that земля будет ей пухом. And I didn't prepare the speech, it's just kind of very spontaneous.
No, it was great. It was great. Wonderful story. Thank you. Today, my dear friends, following our tradition, we say Lech B'Shalom. Go forth in peace. Margarita's time has come and the Almighty has summoned her. And we know that the angels in heaven are greeting her with the words Boi V'Shalom, enter here in peace. And now she is up there with her parents, with Abraham, and together they will petition God for our well-being here on earth, because that is what we believe in our tradition. But here on earth, Rita's light will shine upon us and will inspire us to live well and to be good human beings. So may Margarita's memory be a blessing upon all of us. Let us honor Margarita's memory with a moment of silence. Please rise and the memorial prayers will follow. אל מלא רחמים שוכם במרומים, אמצע מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכנה, במעלות קדושים עטורים כזוהר הרקיעים מזהירים, את נשמת מרגריטה שהלכה לעולמה, בעל הרחמים יסתרע בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וזו בצור החיים מת נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. God full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence's wings, within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, who shine and resemble the skies, to the soul of our beloved Margarita. The Master of Mercy will protect her forever, and will bind her soul in the bond of everlasting life. That is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. Finally, my friends, we shall recite Kaddish. As you all know, this is the most important memorial prayer in Judaism, yet I would like to remind you, Kaddish is not about death. Kaddish is all about the glory of God, and therefore it is about the beauty of life. And so today, here and now, we shall honor Margarita's life. We shall honor the light that she brought into this world with the sacred words of our ancient prayer. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, bi'alma divra chiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dachol Beit Israel, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהיה שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי יתקודשה ברכו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יש לעם רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואילו אמן. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort all the bereaved. You may be seated, my friends. In just a few moments, the cemetery staff will close the lid of the vault, and then everyone will have an opportunity to take part in the burial. In Judaism, the most important aspect of the funeral rites is participation in the burial of the deceased. It is not just a nice thing to do, it is a fundamentally important religious one. So all of us, each of us will have an opportunity to fulfill this very important mitzvah, commandment, and to lay some earth into the place of eternal rest of our dear Margarita. It will take just a few minutes. We will announce when we shall be prepared to proceed. Are there special instructions given to Lady Cassandra from the cemetery as to how they do it? With a buffalo with logs or... Do they require gloves or not? Because some don't. Friends, we shall now proceed with the interment. We'll start with the immediate family, and then everyone, please do take part in the burial. Be careful, please watch your step. The earth is kind of heavy, so don't take too much on the shovel. You may also use your hands like we did in the old country. And I certainly advise you, if you will be touching the shovel, please do wear gloves. I know many of you do, so that's a good idea. Let's go ahead. Friends, we can only come from one side due to the fact that there is a monument on our way on the other side of the building. Yes, it was. Margarita was how she went back. Well, just like in the US. So Russia, but Michael. And in the Netherlands, in Russia, people do stuff like that. Blend in, just like the Americans did. Like I said, he's not going to go around unless he is unless not his part. Dennis Malone. Geneva Malone. That's the one? Because I did a service with him maybe a month ago. Well, I haven't seen her in a long time. I talked to her a few times. Yeah, not much. Not really. I do services. Well, that's what I don't understand. Her suspension is over. So she is eligible to reapply, but for some reason she's, I don't know. I mean, I talked about it, she's kind of basic. But the thing is, Rudy is basically pretty much everybody's wearing masks.
Let's scan the photo, crop it, and I'll call it what the black photo. I just, I like that. You see the account on that, I didn't bother reach out to I walked in there
go outside there, I usually run. So when you run, that's all. Just a little normal time, you know?
Yeah, but he's
Well, he's probably not much good. When he comes on, he's gonna be old. In the 80s, he'll be old. Well, okay, when I saw him a few times 20 years ago, I think he was already in the 60s.
Oh, yes, it's in there. Oh, Tim, the bag's under the chair. Which bag? It's that white Kinko's.
Мы хорошо вчера поговорили, вы мне дали, вы мне дали такую, значит, хорошую, значит, информацию, ну, и поэтому получилось, да, получилось как раз сформировать